Hi, this is Brian Passion. Welcome to another exciting podcast episode. DMSC is over, and the buzzword, whether justified or not, is AI this, AI that. So I decided to bring automotive industry veteran, AI leader, pioneer, and one of the few people who actually has thousands and thousands and thousands of examples of AI in automotive. Albert, CEO of IDprivacy.ai. Albert, I'm so excited to just have a conversation to help dealers get up to speed. So, for the dealers who don't know you, give me a little thumbnail of your work, your tenure here in automotive.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I really have always valued everything you're doing. And talking about a pioneer, I feel very honored to be in front of a pioneer myself. So thank you again.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So Albert Thompson, as you mentioned, CEO and founder of ID Privacy. My background has been, I see 25 years, Brian, but it's been longer than 25 years. I started when I was 16 in automotive and haven't been able to escape since then. Sold my first franchise store in Northeast Ohio at 16, and Carfax in the early 2000s, and Auto Trader. And from there, the background just continues to keep layering on. Went to help launch TradeRev, and took that to Car Global when that was exited, and was one of the first few to also help launch Drive Auto. Took that to the Sinclair Broadcast Group and built their digital tech stack till I actually launched my previous company, which is, Brian, we spent a lot of time together on that side, which was the first party identity layer, and was able to take an exit early 2024. And now here we are with ID Privacy AI.
Great. So, Albert, I've been following you on LinkedIn. First of all, you have the most thoughtful posts. They're not short in any way. You love to write like I like to write.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wonder, should I make this short or long? But I can't help myself. I wanted to interview you because there seems to be a mad rush for AI solutions. My concern, and I brought this up a number of times, is who's controlling the consent, who's controlling the cadence, and who's controlling the context if there's 3, 4, or 5 different AI platforms being used in the dealership. So give me your snapshot. What are you seeing? Obviously, you're knee deep in all of this, or neck deep, but what's your observation in how the vendor community is approaching AI and selling those solutions to dealers?
Yeah. It's interesting that you actually brought this up. It's one of the biggest pain points and one of the biggest problems that we early on, when I launched the organization, saw as a problem, right? And if you think about it, literally the thesis, the problem statement, the thesis that we saw in the very beginning, especially as to how it pertains to AI and how it's going to, integrate within a dealer operation, is we already have system sprawl. And we already have data sprawl, right? We have average dealer, I think, has 9 to 12 systems today.
Yep.
And here's the problem, right? Now we're talking about adding AI tools on top of tools and on top of systems. None of them are talking to each other. None of them are interoperable. And I think you said, right, consent, none of them they all have individualized consents. So there's no unification to this. So my biggest problem, my biggest fear, is that we're just going to further fragment AI on top of further fragmented systems, and ultimately is going to lead to a messy divorce with dealer and AI tools in 6 months.
Yeah. And, we're going to get into that and what your company is doing. But what do you think one of the biggest misconceptions about AI is for dealers? Because it seems to me that dealers aren't concerned right now about consent, cadence, and context. They just see it as, yeah, that would be good, but this guy's helping me with my service. This agent is helping me with lead follow-up. This agent is responding to phone calls. What's your take on the biggest misconception with AI in automotive?
So I think there's several misconceptions. And I think you just nailed it, right? The fact that we're thinking about agents in the sense that I have an agent for service, and maybe I have an agent that's going to do my SMS, and then I'll have an agent that's going to do my SEO. I think that's the first misconception. The biggest misconception is that, we think the AI or agents is something that you just buy and that you just bolt on. And I get why that misconception exists. I totally get it. Dealers have been buying software their whole career, right? They know how to evaluate a DMS. They know how to negotiate CRM contracts, and they know how to kick the tires and watch the demo and sign the order form and implement. That model works for static software. Unfortunately, Brian, AI is not static, right?
Right.
It's not deterministic. It changes, it learns, it adapts. And you mentioned that with the cadence. And to me, cadence is a big word for orchestration. And if you don't have a native AI stack that works across service, sales, parts, finance, and the entire dealer ecosystem, that cadence doesn't work, right? So now you're, like I said, you're going back to further fragmenting it. So misconception number one is that AI is not deterministic; it's probabilistic. And so I don't think the dealers quite understand that. So you really have to understand that you don't buy it like software. It doesn't implement like software, and it can't just be bolted on. That's misconception number one, right? You can't just take one tool here and say that's great. That's my service voice agent, and I'll do this one for my sales, and I'll do this one for my SEO. That's a problem in itself. Number two, the other misconception is that dealers tend to think that AI, for some reason, we've all thought that AI should be perfect. And we think that, and I don't know where this came from, but I think everybody thinks that the agent should be perfect from day one. And I explain to dealers all the time. I have many conversations. I say, listen, if AI agent, as you say, is perfect from day one, it's not AI. It's scripted. It's automation. And scripts break the moment the customers go off that context you're talking about, off that cadence you're talking about, and say something that the vendor or the scripting tool did not anticipate. And that's that orchestration layer. So in automotive, that's going to be every 3 calls. My dad actually owns the car. I'm calling because my truck is leaking, but I also want to trade it in. Can you help me do that? Real agents can handle those, scripted ones, right?
Right.
And the other thing is too, right, is we think that these AI agents are going to be perfect from day one, but they have to actually learn. And I think there's a third misconception, right? And this is an important one for me. Mistakes in software means failure. And that's true, right? So if you buy a website, it's not loading, you have an error 400 or 404, that's broken, right? That's true. Mistakes in AI does not mean that the AI failed. Mistakes actually mean the system's alive. If your agent never makes a mistake, it's not AI and it's not learning. And this is important because dealers have to go in with a different psychological mindset, and they have to go in with a different understanding of how this is going to deploy in their business. And what you should measure is not whether it makes the same mistakes or makes mistakes, but can it learn? Can it get better?
Right.
And will it, do these become teachable moments? The mental shift I ask dealers every day to make, you're not buying software. You are hiring a literal team member. You have to train it. You have to coach it. You have
Kind
to
of
correct it.
nurture it, give it some guardrails,
Yes.
coaching. Yeah.
Yeah.
So think about that for a moment. Dealers have primarily the same business model, but how they execute is very different.
Yeah.
So when you think of where the industry is heading, do you think that dealership executives now really have to get some training, education on how to train these agentic agents with their mindset, with their protocols, with their processes? Now, I've heard vendors say, well, just give me your employee handbook, give me your training manuals, give me, whatever, and it will just absorb it and learn from that. That seems very optimistic for me. So, what expectation would you like to set, especially on this third misconception? AI agents are being deployed. How much work does the dealer have to do in those first few months to make sure that their newbie 24/7 employee is doing the right thing?
Yeah. Let me start off by taking a step back and painting a picture for us. Let me frame this up. For years and years and years, right? Think about your general manager, right? That phone ringing meant cha-ching, right? That meant dollar signs.
Right.
Every time they heard that phone ringing in the dealership. So now I literally say this statement to dealers. And now I want you to imagine on a Saturday morning, your sales guys are kicking back. Maybe they're playing on YouTube. There's not a soul on the lot. That phone's not ringing. And your owner, your dealer principal picks up the phone and goes, "Why is there only 8 appointments on the books? We normally have 20." And you have AI deployed and the phone's not ringing. What do you do? And in real world scenario, right? You have this control, right? You could say, get up out of your desk. You go to the BDC, guys, go pick up all of the sales from the last 6 months and pick them up and call them, and whatever the
Right,
case
right.
is.
Yeah, give specific tactical instructions because the human observation is saying we have a problem based on historical norms.
And we have a psychological need to try to fix it, right?
Yes.
What are you going to do? You're going to yell at the AI agent? Probably not, right? So what you'll do is pick up the phone and fire your vendor. Get it out of here. It's not working. Kick it out.
Right.
That's the first thing you do because that's the first control you can take. I'll just put my BDC back in, or I'll just put my sales guys on this because this isn't working. I had 12 appointments normally. I got to tell you, this is very important. This is not something you just roll in and put in there. This is like deploying a DMS. This is like deploying a CRM. You have to, you have to have buy-in from your teams. You have to have buy-ins from the BDC. You have to have buy-ins from leadership all the way down because these scenarios really happen. And there is another side. There is a there. I've seen it. I've got the case. I've seen it literally happen at every store that just pushes through these moments. But those moments are real. And I think that a real partner to a dealer is going to set that expectation up from the ground floor up.
I love that. I love that. I asked people on LinkedIn a question. The funny thing about LinkedIn, and you probably know this, Albert, as well, when someone's impacted by something you write or I write, due to the politics, they can't always comment, so they'll send me a message like, "Hey, read your article. Oh, that's awesome." I can't really publicly state that, or, "Hey, I can't believe people are voting like that," whatever. So whatever people see on our posts or newsletters is just a fraction of what's going on. But I put up a poll recently asking people in automotive who should be the controller of compliance for AI outreach. So if the CRM, for example, let's just say you have Drive Centric with their agentic agents, and then you have Dealer Funnel with some AI agents doing marketing. And then you have another AI tool that is running, chat on the website, and then another AI tool that's handling service and sales phone calls, right? Yeah, let's just say that's very common to potentially have 4 different people using some type of AI intermediated communication. So I asked, who should control it? Is it the CRM? Is it the DMS? Is it the CDP or an independent platform? And it was funny when some people said the DMS, which is kind of funny because the DMS is like a dirty cesspool of data. So I had private comments, people saying, "Whoever said DMS is dumb as rocks." Okay, so
Yeah.
but here's the thing, that this is just how people vote. It's a reflection of how they're thinking. Anybody who says that DMS should be the central repository for unified customer communications hasn't really understood how dirty their data is.
Yep.
Albert, what would you say in a world where most CRMs are going to have an AI layer built in,
Yep.
and potentially, those CRM companies are not going to be handling in and outbound phone calls. So you might have a second company, Call Review, Car Wars, Toma, Numa, Mia, Spine. I mean, the list is growing. If you had a future cast, who's going to control the permissioning, right? Consent, context, and cadence. Who, in a multi-vendor world, where should that sit?
Yeah. Great question. And I think, personally, and this might sound self-serving, I don't think it's any of those tools today. I think it's actually a system of action, right? That's purpose built for agents. So think about that for a second. And the CDP, right, is built for, giving that unified, it's built for the marketer, giving a unified view of the customer so they can segment, target, and activate across the digital pathways, right?
Correct.
The CRM, system of record, built for the dealer, built for the salesperson managing the leads. And I can see why a CRM would want to have tools that could help to manage leads. But a system of record ultimately isn't that system of action, right? And so this kind of leads into us, right? This is a little self-serving, but ultimately, I think the engagement operating system becomes the layer between the customer contact, the conversation, and the conversion, right? And in that middle layer, that's where these agents can have context graphs that understand real-time context that's happening with the customer, and all of those. It's that unified layer that would operate across all of the different dealer profit centers, and that layer would be purposely built to do what it's supposed to do, which is handle those customer interactions. So, and I think in a perfect world, I think you'll see the CDP underneath, right? Because you need to make sure that you have that as the foundation. You'll have
Right.
the engagement operating system sitting above that, right? Where the agents are literally just focused on engagement and customer interactions. And then ultimately they'll be able to interact directly in and out of the systems of record.
So let's dive into that. For dealers who don't know what your company's North Star is, what your goal is, what's your elevator pitch? Because it's has many levels of intrigue, but what would you do to kind of summarize for people on our podcast where you believe your unique skill set and vision is to help solve dealer problems?
Yeah, so essentially that's exactly right. So ID privacy is an AI engagement, agentic AI engagement operating system. But let me just make simple sense of that, right? Is that we have built that middle layer that brings in, I don't care if it's a third-party lead from AutoTrader, I don't care if it's an inbound service call, an inbound sales call. It's the purpose-built operating system that sits underneath of all of the dealer profit centers to capture every interaction, and activate and manage those leads and those customer conversations end to end through sales, service, and retention workflows using voice, SMS, and email and chat. And with that, these agents, they are context aware, channel aware, and journey aware. So I'll explain that. So, and you see today, and you mentioned some of those tools, right? There's tools that maybe just take in inbound service calls, but that falls short, right? Because there's real context in those service calls that are relevant to a sales agent. And
That's correct.
those agents need to understand each other. And that context gets lost if you don't have that operating system in between.
Yeah, and let's just pause for a minute because I
Mhm.
always like to give a dealer example. What Albert's talking about, if somebody calls to book a service appointment, an AI agent may do a perfect job, but they may also say, hey, by the way, I'm thinking about trading in my car
Yes.
and I'm not sure how much these repairs are, so I may consider a trade-in. Well, a AI agent just built for service will book the appointment. When you have agents working together, then there would be a handoff and say, hey, look, this customer's coming in for service, but they're also thinking trade, maybe start reaching out to them and finding out what vehicle they want to trade into, and what you're saying is having all of those agents working together in an engagement layer is what makes the magic work.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I think and that's the big difference between, say, like a chatbot and say, um, you know, great, that's good information, and then it basically just takes it and it's a passive system. So take that same scenario, right? Somebody calls in for service, and you've seen it today, right? Are you new, returning? And then, hey, I see you have this vehicle on record. Great. And the customer might even say, hey, actually, I sold that car, and that's a big problem for us, right? That car's not no longer. So the agent would still just book the appointment and go through it. And then maybe the customer does say, but I am still thinking about trading it in, or maybe looking at an opportunity. that appointment might just get booked and it's just passive. That's it. That tool stays static. It's done. It sits onto the side, and that is ultimately there's just no interoperability in an engagement operating system. Essentially, that would come down right to that context layer, and that context-rich response would then pass over to a sales agent who can then put all of that together. Actually, take out the vehicle that the customer said I don't have anymore, right? Which then becomes this living, healing, intelligent graph, and then update it to validate the vehicle that's their car, and then update them as a trade intender. And then that next outreach might say, hey, Mr. Smith, I saw that you reached into service and said you had a Rogue you were interested in possibly trading in. It'd be really great to talk to you about the new Rogues. Do you have 30 minutes this week to get you in? And that's a context-rich approach to the agent reaching out.
Yes. So, Albert, there's a lot of claims about the benefits of AI.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's taking inbound phone calls, more recently, people doing outbound phone calls. Obviously, the lead handling 24/7. Again, I always worry about, this idea of compliance, context, and cadence. But you have published and shared online a number of examples in scale, meaning nothing insignificant, for dealers who are really looking for a partner, for an agentic solution, and they want to understand what benefits they could have from dealing with your company. Can you give me one example for variable ops for the sales people leaning in, and one for the fixed ops? Because we are getting more and more fixed ops directors listening into our podcast. So could you give me two examples? And would you also give us the context of how long it takes to kind of ramp up to speed, right? So you just said, you said earlier, Brian, I want people to know that there's some training. So when you say, hey, this Toyota dealer booked, what was the context? Was that, okay, in their first 90 days, they got everything perfect, and then that fourth month, they rocked it like this? Give me an example for variable ops and fixed ops.
Yeah. So, so our system, really, first commercial agents that went out are the sales and the service agents, right? So very simply put, our systems are bi-directionally integrated into most of the CRMs and most of the service schedulers in the platform, right? So you would deploy, let's just start with variable ops, right? So you would deploy an inbound and an outbound sales agent. And I say inbound and outbound sales agent because they're two different things. I've heard a lot of other companies saying, oh, we should have one agent that does it all. And that's actually fundamentally just doesn't actually make sense, right? Because there should be agent to agent, handling. But as an example, if there was a GM or a dealer principal listening right now, and you wanted to actually deploy an agent with ID privacy, we would essentially integrate directly into the CRM. We would deploy an inbound agent for voice, SMS, email, and chat, all of them interconnected and talking to each other. So if somebody comes to the chat, and here's an example and says, hey, I'm looking at this vehicle, is this OEM still offering 0% financing? Engages, disengages. Maybe the next day they pick up the phone and call. Then the agent would actually be able to take that call and know who that person is, right? Be able to have that conversation. Hey, are you still calling back about that vehicle with that 0%? And then essentially on an outbound perspective, right? If that appointment doesn't book, because the goal of the inbound agent would be to essentially get through vehicle of interest, identify trade opportunity, finance interest, and then ultimately book the appointment. And also that doesn't matter if it's from Auto Traders. As soon as it hits the CRM, or if it's an inbound call, the agent can work that inbound. On an outbound, it's going to work that first quality response. It's going to maintain brand, voice, tone, the important things that matter for the continuity of that brand presence. And then, of course, just work out outbound SMS, email, and, of course, outbound voice as well. And I'll explain how we handle that from a compliance perspective as well. But in terms of timing, let's just talk about from sales time, and then I'll switch over to fixed ops. What I always recommend dealers is 90 days. We've seen dealers go from first start to like record months in 90 days. And I call this the first time to first value. It's one of the KPIs that matters. I mean, this predicts whether or not your deployment will survive or it'll fail. And I think that most of the dealers want to hear that it's going to start right away. It does. By the way, don't get me wrong. Day one within hours, you're going to be booking appointments. There's no question. The outbound agent's going to be making calls, booking appointments, but it's going to have, where it might say GX 460 instead of GX 460. And this is where we have to understand that the agent's learning, and I call these teachable moments. And we shouldn't focus on the minors. We should focus on the majors. Did we get month one lift? Did you do 80 appointments last month and now we did 96? This is
Right.
the stuff that we should be thinking about. And then month two, did we do better than that? Did we do better than that? Are we closing? And then using the humans, and I want to be very, very open about this. We don't believe that AI, should take humans' jobs. Humans should, if you were a great salesperson, you're going to be a stellar salesperson if you do this right.
Right. Right.
Because you should augment, right? Let the AI do the redundant, monotonous work. So imagine all of a sudden now the agent is working all the inbound leads and the outbound leads, doing all the texting, SMS at scale. We build our own orchestration layer. So let me explain this a little bit. This is very important. We don't use third-party tools like, N8Ns of the world or Makes of the world to stitch workflows. That's actually one of our biggest secret sauces. It took us about 2 years to develop and to get right. But the key is the agents can decide and reason and act autonomously based on context, like you said, compliance, guardrails, policies, and then ultimately, the conversations and the signals, and then it can decide what the next step is. So if John Smith says, hey, I'm interested, can you give me a call tomorrow back at 12? That agent will look at, are they open? Is it Sunday? Are they closed? All these different things, right? The guardrails, and then decide, if that's the best move, and then it'll make that decision. So you've got agents working your leads 24/7. Obviously not calling people or anything like that at midnight, because that's the guardrails, right? And then when they become an active hand raiser, then it pushes it back to the human as an alert. And then that's where these humans should be focused. Focus on when the agent gets them to the point where they're ready to act. Then you engage and bring them in for the showroom. And then dealers that actually follow that methodology are seeing incredible results. And on service side, if they were
Albert, before you go to service, I was
yeah.
just thinking something,
Mhm.
and I don't know if this analogy holds water. I'll let you react. But a few times, and I'm not a student of the best super salesman in, automotive retail, but there have been some amazing people, who are selling like, hey, I'm selling 80, 90 cars a month. And you're like, and then of course I have to ask, well, how are you doing that? It's kind of like, I have an assistant, and some of these people have two assistants. And what they've figured out is the tasks that they're really good at, that add value and keep people engaged, and the tasks that they're really not good at. And by having these assistants, their throughput, instead of 10 or 15 cars a month, or 80, 90 cars a month. Maybe we should be using that analogy more, that the salespeople who have a vision to do more, to serve more, to grow more, can look at AI as their assistants to take care of the tasks that are not adding value and focus on the tasks that really bring value. How does that sound to you?
That sounds like spot on. That's how this should be looked at. AI for the assists. The thing is, and I've even coached dealers, right? I think this is something I actually even mentioned right now. You'll sometimes get dealers and they'll knee jerk, right? Because maybe the AI is answering the calls, and all of a sudden somebody calls in and complains, this you're using AI, whatever, right? And you're going to have complaints.
Right.
And dealers, they'll get nervous. They'll be like, oh, this is, it's an AI. The reality is of course it's going to get complaints. If it's doing 100% of your calls in service or in sales, for example, and a human isn't, you're expected to get mistakes. But
Right.
going back to what you just said, the proper response to that customer will be like, but you know what, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, we value you so much in showroom. The experiences that we want to provide to you when you walk into our showroom and when you're buying a car here, we feel that, you know what, it's better to have an assistant, a digital assistant answering our calls so that we can put all of our time and energy to you when you're here at the dealership.
Come on, let's go. I love that. Albert, let's talk about fixed ops for the fixed ops directors, or for the general managers who are looking to just get a little better education on what's possible on the fixed ops side? What are you seeing for your customers?
Yeah, I think well, there's a lot of things that are happening. First off, let's talk about consumer adoption with AI. I think that's important. These last 2 years have been really interesting. We've seen millions of interactions. I think we're just shy of 1 million plus calls, over 130,000 service booked appointments. So we've seen a lot. And I've seen it go from customers immediately, like really most of the time wanting to transfer to a human and not wanting to talk to an agent, to now all of a sudden, 70, 80, 90% of the calls are booked with the AI agent. And the customers are happily to do that. And I think what's ultimately happened is the consumer adoption is to the point where now they're like, hey, my time's valuable. If this agent actually isn't going to be wonky or clunky and actually get me through the process and get me through quickly and actually solve my needs, the consumers are okay with it. That is absolutely 100%. I think to this point there, I mean, you might get 1 out of 30 that might say, I don't want to talk to an agent now. It's incredible, especially if the agents are doing a good job.
Well, Albert, I want to piggyback on that. I have so many of my friends, men and women, that are just like, hey, man, I'm using Chat GPT for everything. I was just talking to a married couple. It's like, Chat GPT is the greatest thing. Are you using it? So number one, I'm seeing that. Number two, because I like analogies to bring people back to where we are. I'm 64. So when I first started traveling by air, you went to a travel agent and you got paper tickets and you got them mailed to you. And if you lost those paper tickets, you were out of luck.
Right.
When the internet first opened up, the booking portals for, I was mostly flying United at the time, were kind of clunky and hard, and you would try and you got frustrated, and then you ended up calling. Today, I am the expert travel agent. I can do multi-leg flights. I'm looking for discounts. I'm looking for seats and plane configurations. I don't want to talk to anybody at United or Delta unless I have a major problem. And I'm wondering if we're in that transition, right? That over the last year or two, we're throwing up some AI models, hoping to solve some gaps. More and more people are working through them, but I still think we're in the early days. And so, like you said, dealers shouldn't give up because the revenue lost is invisible
Yes.
because you don't know if people are calling. You don't know if people are doing the work. With the AI workflows, you know the work is being done. So, in effect, the calls are being made, the emails are being sent, the texts are being sent, and now for the first time, you could see, where maybe your process isn't scaled properly. But
Yes. Yeah.
this is a time of transition. So, what are we seeing in service? What's some exciting news about filling gaps that have been in fixed ops for a long time?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I love what you just said about seeing and identifying processes. And I think this spans across variable ops and fixed ops because for the first time ever, right, you have a different set of lenses that you can operate off of as a dealer. Never in the history of automotive, right, have we actually had the ability to look, listen, and learn from everything that's happening in our dealership at scale. Because not only do these agents take the calls, right, but you're pulling in that intelligence from the transcripts, what the customers are saying, why they're transferring, what the transfer was about. Are they upside down on a trade? You're picking up the signals of, I had a soccer mom the other day picking up her kids. And so you're learning she's a soccer mom. All of that nuance. And so really the technology, the moat, Brian, is not the calls, the technology of the conversations like the text and the emails and the voice. The real moat is that data intelligence behind it.
Yes.
The exciting things is that. The exciting things is what you can do with that data. The second part of it is having agents that are working together as a team in the background. Imagine a call comes in, person says, hey, I've got a Tesla. I want to schedule for a change in my battery. And said, I want to come in today. Well, that's great. I can certainly make that appointment happen, but maybe that battery's not in stock, right? So in milliseconds, you need to have another agent that's looking in the parts, looking for availability, saying, oh, you know what? I don't have that part, but just sent off an order right now. put the order in for the battery to come in. All this is happening on a call where the customer in seconds doesn't realize it. Agent comes back, says, Brian, love to get you in today. However, your Tesla battery needed to be ordered. It'll be here Friday, April 23rd. Why don't we look at the appointments that day? I have 8:30 and 11:30. Which works for you?
Yeah,
And
that's sick.
now you're talking about customer CSI at a whole other level. You're not bringing them in there for parts that aren't available. Setting proper expectations, and these agents are all working together. And then on top of this is where I keep going back to that context layer. That's real-time signals. So you know what I love about the CDP, right? The CDP is the foundation. And you and I we'll talk about this later, but that CDP being the foundation and having that clean data layer on the operating system layer, right? That system of action layer, you're picking up real-time signals. So now all of
Right.
a sudden, hey, this guy's got a Tesla. I know he's got a battery. I know he needs to order the battery, right? He's at 43,000 miles. There's equity opportunities. All of that is real-time signals that need to go back to that CDP. So it needs to make its
That's
way
right.
to a context graph. It needs to make its way back to that CDP.
Yeah, and this is why I wanted to have you on because you have had a jump start on the CDP world, marketing activation. You've been really ahead of the things that people know me to write about.
Yep.
And I saw you were doing all sorts of things with AI and started publishing, dealer success stories. I'm like, no one else is publishing ever. It's like already, through, the trial by fire, getting all these workflows to work together and that's exciting. And that's why I think like in the future at MRC, I think it would be great for us to figure out how do we work on something that really educates the dealers, like, something meaningful, like we did the CRM survey of dealers. Dealers really liked that. I'm wondering if we really should be doing some almost like an AI playbook. What should the dealers be thinking about? Like when I publish the guide on CDPs, I think you have a wealth of information. One of the other pieces before we close today, you mentioned it, time to value. When I was working with Telium on the CDP project for Morgan, value engineering was brought up. And, when dealers normally buy software, that's never brought up. And
Right.
Telium was very good about let's set up a plan so we can show you the value engineering, what's important to you, what are the goals, and how long is it going to take. And I was like, that's a really good exercise. But you also brought it up. So you're in an enterprise mindset. I think I want to dive into that a little bit. When dealers ask you whatever your platform costs,
Yep.
and I don't think cost is what I'm interested in.
Right.
I'm talking about how do you explain to them the value engineering piece? Like, hey, if you trust me with your engagement layer, with this communication layer, with the agents that we've built, you mentioned in and outbound for
Mhm.
sales and service and parts and warranty and recall and F&I, all the agents that you've built. How do
Right.
you talk to them about the value delivered for their investment, right? They have to, you said, management has to buy in.
They have the buy-in.
People, people have to push through learning curves.
Yep.
We understand that this is an ecosystem that is learning and refining and improving over time. What's that conversation normally look like for a dealer or a dealer group?
Yeah, great question, right? Because I think a lot of it is discovery first, right? Helping them to understand exactly what this means. Because, like I said, I really, and Brian, I really want to echo what you said in the very beginning of the call about these stacking tools on top of tools. We're seeing that today, and I'm nervous to see what that's going to look like down the road. Because I think the unfortunate thing is, yeah, you can get some instant value, right? You can start to see booked appointments. But there's a bigger conversation that you need to be having with the dealer groups and the dealers. And that's that long term, like this isn't going away. AI is not going away. It's here, right? So we really need to sit down with them. And I like what you said about the operational mindset, because I think that's how we need to be thinking about that from a dealership perspective. We need to be talking about operational maturity. Anybody can sell you a demo, but we really need to be thinking about, predictable timelines. What does this look like implemented with the BDC team? How does this look like with your sales? So we need to sit down and, what's important to them, right? When we talk about first time to first value, they're counting the clock, right? And they need to see measurable value. So what is that measurable value, right? Is that, hey, I need to see my appointments booked, going from here to here. Okay, that's fine. Do I need to see, my data layer, being, more robust and having more signals so that I can activate better? I think all of these AI deployments need to have some sort of KPI matrix, and every dealer is different. I think, we
Right.
start from scratch with every dealer, and that's the other thing too. This isn't a set it and forget it. I found that, right? You can't just set this into any store and say, okay, here you go. Here's your service agent. It's going to answer all your calls and you're set. That's not gonna work long term, right? You have to really sit down and do that. So I think the answer is it's every dealer is different, but it's all built off of the same framework, right? Um,
Right.
we know that you ultimately have some pain points. What are those pain points? Because think about this for a second. You have the in service, for example, you now have coverage. You have bandwidth. Before you were bandwidth constrained. Brian, think about this. How many times have we talked to dealers and they just want to buy more leads, more marketing, more leads, more, because everything comes to bottom funnel, and that's what their salespeople can handle. They can get more leads, and more leads ultimately they think means more sales. We fundamentally think differently. You don't need more leads. You need a better process to
Right.
manage those leads, right? And so that's, resetting the mindset of the dealership and saying, hey, you now have a tool that can do all of these things. So where is that value? It's not maybe more leads. It's how do we want these agents to work those leads? How do we want?
Albert, you bring up this more leads, better process. I want to tell a story because I want dealers to remember certain things about our conversation.
Yes.
Until Urban Science started showing the defection data,
Mm-hmm.
dealers didn't know if their processes were broken. And I'm going to come back to that. Just as you said before AI, dealers never knew that their process is being fully executed 24/7, and they could see if
Yes.
that process is scale tested or volume tested. But let me go back to urban science. When dealers see their defection data and what day the person defected, and the context for the dealers here, if they don't have this data, it's the most valuable data. If a lead is in your CRM, Urban Science, as soon as that person buys from another dealership, they're going to send you a signal into your CRM. If you have both Sales Alert and Traffic View, they're going to tell you if that person bought from the same brand and was it a local. So imagine you're a Honda dealer, you think you have your processes locked down, and then all of a sudden you see in day 14 through 21 huge defection rates.
Yep.
That isn't a lead problem.
No.
That's a process problem. And then my brother Glenn goes into their CRM and says, yeah, your workflows are really for the first 14 days, you stop in your mindset. Your process kind of goes on autopilot after day 14, and look at all the people who bought from the Honda dealer down the road. This is going to be a beautiful time, I think, Albert, when you are able to guide dealers using data sources to refine the processes, right? The AI models and workflows we have today are going to change over time. But here's the cool thing. We're going to start to get in these external signals
Yep.
so that we can get better at lowering defection rates, having contextual messages, as you mentioned, cross department. This is an amazing time.
Yes.
For dealers who are leaning in and saying, this is the first time I heard somebody talk common sense about AI, and let's work through the business needs. Let's do a value engineering, timeline. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you or visit your company website? What's that URL?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. It's www.idprivacy, just like your ID. It's actually, and by the way, I'll take an opportunity to say this: intelligence, data, private, focused AI, right? That's it. That's not ID like a driver's license, intelligence driven privacy AI. So it's idprivacy.ai. And that's where they can find us or
And what
LinkedIn.
if they wanted to send you a direct note, Albert? How do they send you an email?
Yeah, Albert Albert at idprivacy.ai.
That's so easy.
Yep.
Albert, there's so much. We're going to have to put our heads together
Sweet deal.
because now that DMSC is over, we are going to set our sights for November for modern retailing. So, why don't you put your head together on what you think dealers need most to help them navigate through the AI transformation of their business and to avoid some of the potholes? And then let's work to do a presentation in November. How's that sound like to you?
No, I think it sounds fantastic, Brian. And I want to leave you with this because I know we're coming on time, but the last piece here that we just touched on, this defection piece, is so important because if you actually think about it, and this is a learning lesson and it's a very exciting time. AI did not break your process. AI revealed your process was already broken.
Yeah, come on. And this is it's exciting now. Here's what I'm wondering.
Hmm.
I'm wondering when we really get these workflows right, the feedback signals from companies like Urban Science on what we lost, what's the limit to the conversion rate of lead to sale? Right now, dealers will say, "Man, we're crushing it. We're doing 17%, lead to sale, 35% appointment to sale, whatever their stats are." Um, it's amazing what the future could be like. I wonder, only can guess what it could be.
Well, we just did an OEM case study. I won't say the OEM. I'll see if I can get permission to get you that. But we did an OEM case study, tier one. We managed all the tier one leads. The agent gave 30 minutes to the dealer for the first 30 minutes to respond to the lead. From then, our agents took over, right? And what we found in this particular OEM, now every OEM is different. In this particular one, it's compact, economical, OEM. But leads would come in, consumers would engage day one. And then there was about 60 to 70% of this audience that would just stop engaging. The agent would follow up, follow up, follow up, follow up. About 6 to 7 weeks, we saw 40% of this audience re-engage out of nowhere, and then in about 2 to 3 weeks purchase. So there was a lag of about 7 to 8 weeks from 4 weeks of zero interaction, zero re-engagement, touched once, 7 to 8 weeks later, 40% of this group would actually then come back and they would buy. And when you were able to extract the data signals from within it, it came down to pretty much one thing. That particular audience was liquidity constraint. Everything came back to, I'm getting a bonus, I'm waiting on taxes, I'm waiting on money to come in. Yet they started shopping in Thanksgiving.
Yeah. What a great reminder that with AI, we don't have to worry about an agent getting tired or burnt out or
Right.
quitting, especially with some of the third-party tools, even data from companies like Client Command that can see people when they're back out shopping, feeding that into an AI model. I mean, there's so
So
much,
much. Yes.
so
Yeah.
much in the future. It's going to be awesome. Albert,
Yes, sir.
CEO, IDprivacy.ai. Albert, thank you so much for being on our podcast. And now that DMSC is over, we need to be providing clarity for dealers who want to upgrade their tech stack and leverage AI, but do it in a safe way. We'll be
Yes.
talking more of this with future shows and getting ready for MRC. Thanks everyone for watching. Albert, thanks for being on the show, and
You're welcome.
finish finish the month strong
I will.
because
Thank you,
we're going to
sir.
help you sell more cars in a digital age. Thanks.
Congrats.